Hi, and welcome to this tutorial that is going to look at using the motion tracking built into After Effects to do some scale changes. So what I'm going to do to start off with is import some clips to work with. I can either go File Import or just double click the project panel and it should open up the import dialog box, and then I can select the files that I want. So you can see for this exercise we have two files. We have some footage of a car traveling, and we have a number plate that we're going to put in place of the original. So I'm going to double click the number plate to bring that in, and you'll see that the number plate comes up with a few options. You're fine to leave it at straight unmatted, but basically the image has an alpha channel and you can choose to ignore it. But in this case, like I said, a straight unmatted should work fine. So you click that and it applies the alpha channel to that. And what I'm going to do is double click again and just go to the folder called car footage. And what you'll see with this is that the footage is actually an image sequence file. So what that means is if you scroll down, you'll see that every frame is an individual image. So if I click on that, that's the first frame, that's the next, that's the third, and so on. And so you can see as you go down, each one is, like I said, its own frame. So what we don't want to do when we're importing this is select all the files by either dragging and clicking, selecting like that, or shift clicking. You just want to select the very first one. As for an image sequence, the file names will always be identical. The only thing that will change is the numbers on the end. Okay, and so because of that, the software automatically recognizes that it's an image sequence, and so when you select the very first image, it will say import as a sequence. Yeah, in this case a JPEG sequence. If the files were something else like TIFFs, it would say import TIFF sequence. But it can sort of recognize that, so that's great. If we only wanted to bring in one image, we would just uncheck that box and it would only bring in that single image. But otherwise, by default, it ticks the box, and all you need to do is select the very first one. Like I said, if you were to drag and select everything, it would bring in every single image as an individual thing, and that's not what we want. So like I said, select the first one and it will import this footage. So basically, actually, to keep it simple, we didn't have to do anything. We just select the very first, as in all of those sort of things I pointed up at ticks and the drop down here. Actually, all we need to do is select the very first image and click import, and it will automatically bring those in. Now, one thing to keep in mind with image sequence files is that when you import a video clip, there's a frame rate attached to it. So when you bring in a MOV or an AVI or an MP4, within that file, okay, there is information about how the frame rate at which that video is supposed to play. With an image sequence, that doesn't exist because every frame is its own image. So the software just works with whatever it's set to by default. So you can see on here it's set to 30 frames per second. Now you can change that in the preferences, but obviously in this case, it's like I said, been left at that default, and the footage was actually recorded at 24 frames per second. So it probably makes sense to sort of just change that. So I can right click the image sequence and go to interpret footage and main. And you can see there it says assume this frame rate, and by default it's assuming it's at 30 when actually it's 24. So I'm going to change that to 24, click OK. So what that does do is it actually changes the time that it takes to run through, right? So before the clip would have been slightly shorter, now it's a little bit longer just because of its frame rate. So keep that in mind, okay, that you are affecting the timing depending on the frame rate you shoot at. And it's important to do that right at the very beginning. We don't want to start adding in animations or anything else and then realize the timing was wrong, because if we then adjust the frame rate here, we'll adjust the timing for the video, but not for any animation we might have added. We're not going to do any animation in this one, but just keep that in mind. Always make sure your frame rate is correct right at the very beginning. Okay, so I'm going to take this file and I'm going to just drop it to the new comp button. And basically we're going to replace the number plate here. So the other image we brought in is just a number plate image, okay, which we're going to place on top shortly. So I'm just going to close those down. There we go. So like I said, so I've dropped my footage onto the new comp button. It's generated a composition. There's my composition icon. Okay, and so I've got that, and now I've got to just track. So what I'll do as well is I'll drop the number plate in. So I know it kind of comes in and it's quite large, but I'm just putting everything that I need on the sequence there. And we're going to make sure I select the video file that is underneath, and I'm going to go to the tracker and I'm going to go track motion. And there we go. So you can see that if there are images or things on top of the video, they can get in the way of the tracker because you wouldn't be able to see the full video image. So whenever you select the tracker, it automatically jumps to what's called a layer view. So you're literally only looking at this one layer and nothing else. So that's great. So you could have been working on a composition with loads of things in the frame, and now you need to track the video. Well, when you press the tracker, it will just jump to the layer view so you can't see anything but this one single layer. So that's great. So what I'm going to do here is I'm not only tracking the position, but I need to track the scale. So I'm going to take that, and you can see now we've got 2 boxes, and it needs those because, as you can see, the car is traveling away. So obviously I need to track the scale, okay, because the number plate is going to have to get smaller. Now, if I had just a single box, all it's really tracking is the point of that position from a X and Y. So in other words, sort of a horizontal and vertical position, where is it on the frame. But with 2, if those 2 trackers move closer together, it recognizes that an object is moving further away. And if those 2 trackers move further apart, then it recognizes the object is getting closer, and it will mimic that with anything else you put in there, in this case the number plate. Right, so what I'm going to do is just sort of drag my tracker and sort of select the top of that number plate perhaps. Remember, if you possibly can, always best to track as near as possible to where you want to place your new object, because things may move slightly differently from different positions. In this case, it's a car, it's all solid. Hopefully it's going to shrink in size identically, but again, it kind of helps if you can do that. So I'm going to select the corner of the number plate and the corner of the plate here. And guess what? I'm probably going to find it's going to struggle with that. And that is kind of part of this tutorial. So if we do have issues, that's fine. We will look to resolve them. So I'm going to press Analyze Forward. Okay, so actually I'll talk while that track is working away. So we've only got a few frames to save us time. So in principle, we understand what's going on. But it could... it might have issues, but luckily I think it seems to have tracked well, which is interesting. And this is the thing, in previous results, it didn't do so brilliantly. So it seems to have, seems to have sort of tracked okay, actually, I think. Well, we'll find out. See, there's a center tracking point. Now, maybe it's just me because it's getting further away, but it feels like it's just slid down a little bit compared to where I started, which was a lot higher. So my guess is it'll probably struggle a little bit, whereas the one on the left seems to have done possibly a better job. But that might be because of actually I was going to say the end lettering, but the P is there as well. So if you do have issues with the tracker, so I think, like I said, I believe that this is going to have a slight issue to it. You can do the other thing, which is start at the very end, put your tracking points, and then just analyze backwards. I found generally that seems to work better. You could even try other parts of the car. So you can see there are bits that are quite dark against a light background, which should make good tracking points as well. Or another thing you can do, which I'm going to possibly look at just doing here, is just check that tracking point. So like I said, it's let's just set it right in the corner, actually. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control and right. And what that's going to do is it's going to jump to the next frame. And I'm going to just adjust some of these myself because I feel like it's just dropping a little bit. Could be wrong. So yeah, this is a fast way to sort of just manually track a little bit. I think the one on the left seemed fine, but this tracking point just felt like it's I don't know, over time it was just sliding down a little bit. So like I said, I'm going to just do that myself. Control and right key, or Command and right key if you're on a Mac, will move forward a frame at a time. And so like that, I can just go in and readjust those tracking points wherever I want. Now, that does happen occasionally where the software, you can try it a few times, just doesn't seem to work well, and you kind of have to go in and tweak it yourself. That's what we have to do. That's what we have to do. This is exactly what the tracker would be doing anyway. In this case as well, we're quite lucky because it's actually a very short clip with, I think, something like 20 something frames or something, 24 frames exactly. Actually, I think it was supposed to be a second. So it won't take us very long. Obviously, you can imagine on a lengthier clip that could be a bit more of a problem. Right, okay, so I've kind of moved that myself, hoping the left side is okay. So we'll see if that just kind of works a little bit better. So at this point, I could now apply the, you can see the target, by the way, is by default the number plate. So the software has just said, okay, I assume you want to use the number plate as a target. It automatically looks for the layer above the one you're tracking and sort of puts that in as the motion target, but you can obviously change that. And if I click apply, what it will do is, because we've got 2 markers, it will apply position information and scale information. So it's going to put both of those onto the clip. But what I'm going to find is that I'm going to have to readjust. In fact, actually, I'll show you what I mean. I would suggest if you're following this tutorial, don't do this step. But if I click apply, it's going to say apply X and Y. Click OK, and it's applied it to the number plate. And if we play that, hopefully we can see the plate generally seems to be holding. There is a slight wobble there. I can see that now. So I might have to go back in and tweak that. But for now, I'm going to just continue with this tutorial. So you can see it's applied it, but now I need to change the scale of this number plate because it's obviously way too big. This is not what I intended. Okay, so now I'm going to have to adjust that. But you can see that actually what it does in the number plate is, look, it puts position information in and it puts scale information in. So we can go in and adjust all of these things, you know, even though there's keyframes, but it just kind of complicates the matter a little bit. So I'm going to undo that. So we're back to kind of where we were initially. I've got my tracking points. Okay, so just before that last part, where I mentioned, you know, pressing the apply button. So actually, rather than applying it to the image that I want directly, I'm going to, in this case, apply it to a null layer. So what I'm going to do is a null object, should I say. Here we go. So I'm going to just deselect anything there, go layer, new, and there's a null object. Okay, click that. There we go. And I've got this null, and you can't see it just yet, but I'll show it to you in a second. So I'm going to change the target to when I click edit target, it gives me an option. It says, okay, what do you want to apply to? Well, I'm going to apply to the null. So I'm going to apply to the null. Okay, click apply. And same as before, X and Y. So I haven't done anything different, except this time I've applied it to this null, which is this box here, rather than the number plate. So if I play it, the number plate doesn't do anything because it's not applied to that. But you can see the null object is following it exactly because I've applied it to the null. Now, just to clarify, what a null is it's called a null because when you render out, you don't see anything. There's nothing there. It's just used to hold information, you know, something that you can use here. But like I said, when you render, you will not see a null object. Okay, so why use a null instead? Well, if you look now, the null has the position and scale information embedded within it, so it's all there. Okay, what you can do is for any layer, you'll see that you have this parent column. And what you can do is you can tell any layer that this is your parent, and that layer will do whatever the parent does. Okay, so it copies the parent. So it's kind of like it's a child-parent relationship. A child always does whatever the parent does. So what we're going to do now for the number plate is say the null is your parent. Okay, and so now what that means is we're back to kind of where we were before, really, in a sense, no different, except this time the plate is following the car because the null is doing that. And so it's doing whatever its parent does. Okay, but the good thing with that is now is that if we open this little disclosure triangle up and have a look, there's nothing on position or scale information. They're both totally empty. So that means, you know, we can now adjust the scale and position. We don't have to worry about the keyframes causing us any issues. So that's really why I sort of just did that way. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this down now. All right, and I'm going to adjust its position. So I'm going to place it where the number plate is. It'll still track exactly the same as before, but hopefully now, you know, it'll just, it's like I say, it's just a little simpler. I can just focus on scale and position here. So let's see if we can get it to sort of the right size and the right position. That's not too bad. I'll just make it slightly bigger, I think. Go for about 16. There we go. Nope, 16 is too big, actually. 15. Try something like that. Okay, so obviously you can take your time, refine that, but I feel like that's okay. Let's have a quick look at that position-wise. There we go. So yes, so like I mentioned, there is a slight issue with the tracker. It might be on the left-hand side, maybe, or maybe it was the one on the right I was doing. It's dropped down slightly, so it's not absolutely perfect yet. So I would need to sort of just go in and tweak that. But let's just have a quick look at completing this tutorial for now. In fact, it looks like it drops after the first frame and then it kind of holds quite well. So if I want to, I can just go back and fix that, but I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Okay, because sometimes you don't notice these things till you apply the changes, and then it's like, okay, now, you know, I've done it all. What do I do now? But we'll have a look at that. So anyway, I'm quite happy with the plate's position. Okay, so we might sort of, you know, if the tracking was fine, you know, would we look at this now and say, okay, we're done? Well, not really, because that doesn't look like a good composite in any way at all. It's so sharp and focused that it, you know, it's just unbelievable in a way, right? Your eye just kind of goes straight to it. However, we're quite lucky because I can just click the little eye symbol, turn it off, and look at what the original or a real number plate would actually look like. So I need to make this look more like that. Okay, so there are a couple of differences I spot straight away. The blacks and the color in here are just so strong. So in other words, it's really saturated, okay, compared to say something like that. Look at the black values of the lettering there, and then look at them here. The other thing I noticed as well is the image just is really sharp. Whereas again, if I look at the lettering there, it's quite blurry. And if I look, the blur sort of seems to be more so just sort of across left to right, which kind of makes sense, I guess, because the car is kind of moving towards the left of the frame in a sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mimic those. So I'm going to go to my effects and presets. Okay, and we'll just take it sort of one at a time. So I'm going to start with, say, something like curves. Okay, and I'm going to apply curves to the number plate. So I'm going to drag that effect there. So at the bottom is the black value, at the top is the white. Okay, so this line that goes across represents black, and like I said, this line that goes across the top represents white. So I don't really want the values here to be sitting on black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that. I'm going to pull them up. Okay, by pulling them up, you can see the blacks aren't as deep anymore. I'll do the same at the top as well, but pull it down a little bit. Okay, and I could always just occasionally jump back and check. You can see the yellows are a little bit stronger, perhaps. So we could perhaps pull that down a little bit more. Okay, just to again increase that contrast. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't exactly match. That point is I'm trying to match the look that you would expect a real plate to have. So the other thing I'm going to do as well is go to blur, because we need to apply that. So you can see there's a whole range of blurs here. I'm going to go for a directional blur. And again, I'm going to put down the number plate. Okay, now with the blur, just to sort of show you, all you've really got is blur length. So if I do that, you can see it's blurring up and down. But here you have a direction. So if you change this direction, the blur will change that way too, obviously in 2 dimensions. But let's just set it to 90 degrees. So it's blurring sideways, and let's turn that down a little bit too strong. Okay, so it's a bit more like that. So again, let's just have a quick look at that without the blur, with the blur. Okay, and so we start to make these little changes, and hopefully, like I said, what we're getting now is a plate that is at least starting to look a little bit more like the one that was there originally, and hopefully we start to get a better composite overall, something that works. Okay, so that's basically the tutorial. Good luck working on that. Obviously, I'll just finish with one last bit, which was I mentioned that right away it kind of drops, plate drops, and then it seems to track a little bit better. Well, I'll say that I think there's a little further drop. So how could I possibly go back and fix that? Do I have to restart and do everything again? No. I can click on the video clip here. Okay, let's go back to our tracker. Here you are. Okay, and there it says motion source. So let's select the video clip that we've got, this silver car JPEG sequence. And you can see it takes us back to our tracker. And so what we can do is we can just sort of have a look and see where exactly is this tracking point falling apart. So again, we can see there it is, top corner, go to the next frame. That they both sort of seem to be okay. I'm going to just slightly adjust this one. Oops, I keep forgetting to adjust it on here. Don't click on any of the points, just click within the tracker itself. There we go. Let's try that. Okay, so I can go in and just double check that they're kind of both holding where they're meant to. Okay, and as long as they're doing that, hopefully it will be fine. In fact, I'm going to just go back a step. So yeah, it's interesting because I've kind of, by doing this, I'm literally just sort of manually tracking both points. So all the movement is based on what I've done rather than anything in the computer. But like I said, even if you choose to do this, sometimes you have to. You're given a video clip and it needs to be tracked. There might be mistakes within it that cause something to fail. It's not your fault. It was just shot that way, and you can make the person who shot the video understand that, and you can explain it to them. But at the end of the day, they're going to be like, yes, but we need this effect, and you sort of have to make that work one way or another. So just keep that in mind as well. That it's things like this happen where you do have to manually sometimes adjust things. Now I've done this very quickly, and my only worry is that I've probably, have I just made it worse? So I'll have a look at it and let's just see what happens with that. So again, when I'm done, it's still set to apply to the null. Just click apply. Yeah, X and Y, and it will just replace what was there originally. Okay, and apply that. Oh yeah, look at that. I did that manually, and that's worked out a lot better, I think, as a track. Whew, got lucky there. So I was a bit worried I was going to make it worse. So give that a go. Try replace the plate, but also think about compositing. In other words, just making it seem like a single image at the end once all the elements are put together. If it can be the best track in the world, but if it doesn't feel like it sits there correctly because of other elements like its color or blur or anything else, then the composite will have failed. So yeah, keep that in mind and give it a go. Thanks for watching.